here before. It's just a bridge. It's the Ambassador Bridge and now the Gordie Howe Bridge. It's also a tunnel. But these trucks don't go in the tunnel. They take the bridges. Back and forth, back and forth. It's like going from Detroit to Sterling Heights, a suburb of Detroit, and back. Detroit and Windsor and back. A part could be manufactured in one company, in one country, and then assembled in the other. It's a seamless process between the two countries. It is an economic ecosystem that exists in the region. Especially, as I said, when it comes to the automotive industry. The supply chains are fully cross-border and mutually reliant. So, why? Oh, and by the way, in case you hadn't heard, today the president has said that he might unilaterally rename Lake Ontario Lake America. Okay. Does this have any force of law internationally? I think changing the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America hasn't taken hold outside the confines of the administration and supporters of the administration. I get that. And I get that he's like trolling Mexico and he's trolling Canada. These are our two closest, obviously, allies, Mexico and Canada. I cannot figure out why we are doing this. Now, there may be some trade disparities. Well, there's trade disparities with lots of nations. Look, when you look at the trade disparity with China, I touched on this very briefly yesterday. Yeah, more US dollars flow into China. They're getting financial benefit that we're not getting it's a trade deficit, or at least in terms of the money's exchange. In the aggregate, they come out ahead. But wait a minute. It's not as if it's not a quid pro quo. We get goods that we order from Amazon at a fraction of the price of what it would have cost to purchase if they were manufactured in the United States. Now, I know we want to improve manufacturing in the United States, but I'm just suggesting that you're getting what you're paying for. That's why so many US dollars are going into China, because the American consumer wants inexpensive goods. And the inexpensive goods are coming from China. So it's not like there isn't a benefit. You're paying something, but you're getting something in return. Is it absolutely equal? I don't know. I haven't studied it between the United States and Canada. Might there be room for adjustments? Maybe so. But the rhetoric claiming that Canada is terrible is beyond my area of comprehension based on my understanding of the traditional relationship. Is there a reason for this? Is this really about Canada? One of the things that this president has done is that he's created almost on a daily basis another crisis. And is there a reason? Perhaps. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just wondering, is there some logical explanation? Is he trying to divert attention from something else by raising these issues that weren't there before? At least seemingly they weren't there before. Or, I mean, some people say that he's losing it or lost it. Um, Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But if you look at this from a logical standpoint, well, there is no logic to this. Well, let me rephrase that. Gary sees no logic in it. There may very well be logic in it that I don't see, and that's why I asked today, why is Trump picking a fight with Canada? I'm going to start calling people in the order in which I see them on the stage. We could use a few more people on stage in queue, by the way, and I will start with Alan if he's available, followed by Scott.
Yes, fortunately, these days I'm about part of the problem is Trump or whatever the
Right, and for
system
those who
killed.
are uninitiated, Alan runs a small business, and if he's busy, he's dealing with customers, retail.
Well,
If he's not busy, he has time to talk to us. So either way, it's a good thing. If he has time to talk to us, he gets to contribute. If he doesn't, he's making money. So unfortunately today, he's not making money, but fortunately today he has opportunity to speak on the mic.
no, it's not. It's not that I didn't make any money. I made earlier. I had a couple of good sales, but that was it. That's the rest of the day. But guess what, Gary? After 26 years, you're not gonna say anything in 6 years, 6 days. In 6 days, I'm off the hook. Finally, somebody was crazy enough about this place. So all it is, it's a legal issue. Finish them out.
Wow.
And then I'm gonna bug you from the corner of my living room, just like 90% of people on the chat room. Anyway, but you touched the exact same thing. It was crossing my mind for a long time. This kind of stuff is the distraction. When you come to look at it, I mean, Mexican, they don't have no beef with us. Canada don't have. They are just a neighbor, and I guess the good neighborly things is out of the market and nobody cares no more. So, and I think it's mostly the distraction. He throw this thing out to convert the attention from one end to another end and then bring it back when you pay attention to this and then they throw something else. It's, I guess it's a common game in politics. Other than that, I don't see any reason. Every Canadian I talk to, they are very good people. They more or less they have the same situation as us. They got some stuff them not agree with them government, some stuff they are, but the kind of customer I deal, they're outrageous with the price of tobacco in Canada. So when they come in here for the business, whatever, they stuck up and they go in there and they hoping they don't get, the uh, tax on the when they enter to Canada. But all the people I talk to, they just normal people. I mean, good, lovely people, and I was involved with a couple of them for a long time, 6, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Michelle and Lee, and unfortunately, they are in heaven. A couple of days ago was Michelle's birthday when it popped in the Facebook. It breaks my heart every year, and I don't know why he's coming out of this stuff. I have no idea. Just like in everything else, I was shocked for 2, 3 months after he called ceasefire between when the Iran regime was falling apart because they all got caught with the pants down.
Yeah, we go one at a time here, buddy. You're for what's your turn. We'll get to you though. Don't worry. Go ahead, Alan.
Why not pick up a fight with Canada? Why?
Yeah, we go one at a time here.
That's what we're asking that question. If you have the answer, hold on till your turn comes. In this room, operate a little bit different. We talk one at a time. We don't let other people interrupt anyway. But hopefully it's not serious. Hopefully it's not going to be, conflict between the individual Canadian and but talked to Lee's brother. He's very mad at Trump for many variety of reasons, and that's how it is. I, to be honest with you, I don't have answer why the heck he does that. Maybe Mr. Amir knows. Maybe Scott or maybe Mr. The last gentleman was trying to do anyway. Back to you, sir. Hope all this stay well.
So for
And
those who don't know, he's been referring to a couple people from Canada, and one who's deceased, Michelle. But you talk about how Lee's brother in Canada is upset with Trump. I'm curious. Have you had discussions with him about whether, I know it's anecdotal, but whether he feels that this has reset the relationship between our two nations permanently, or whether he sees this as a temporary setback that and that things will be repaired following the end of this administration?
no, his feeling is a momentary, because they know president it doesn't last forever in United States. They know in the 4 years he's gonna go away, but for the time being,
Well,
yes,
2 years, 2 years, 2 years,
2 years,
a little over
for
a
2 years, 2 years he's been on, and then uh, you know next person comes in, it changed the whole dynamic of the whole situation. But at the moment, yes, he thinks Trump is damaging the relation between Canada and the United States, and also he's not agree what he does with the international relationship with the allies and so forth and so on. Just the normal thing I hear in this platform from just American or Canadian or people from Europe. Back to you, sir.
So, Alan, you opened up by suggesting that this is a deliberate diversion, and of course, we don't know the answer to this, and I'm not going to, hold you to it. But I'm wondering, in your mind, what do you think is we're being diverted?
But right now, it's basically derived from the situation in Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz and Iran and so forth and so on. Because right now, the world is there are a lot of ship paying tremendous amount of money. They go through the strip, and it's not as they say. Yesterday, they said they cleaned up all the all the mines from everywhere. They cleaned all the mines from the strait, and they are ready. Any boat or anything that goes in there, they shoot them if they wants to re-put the mine under the water again. So there are a lot of things he wants to. And then the midterm comes, he probably throw this the stuff out, see what the reaction is, the public is, and then what kind of outcome it will come. It's a combination of a whole bunch of things. It's the situation we live today. That's it. We have to keep our mind busy with all this stuff and do what they do best, and at the end we come out a loser, just like everything it's happened. The price we pay. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Alan. Listen, I'm going to mention something since you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. I do not want to change the topic of the room, but I just want to bring people up to date on something that's very interesting that happened today, and then we'll get back to the topic of Canada. So please do not respond to this comment. I'm just trying to inform people. Today, Oman and Iran announced that they've reached some kind of a tentative agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And that agreement would include the removal of the mines. Today, the President of the United States announced that the United States Navy has removed all the mines from the Strait of Hormuz. So there we go with another contradiction from there. And it could very well be that you're right, Alan, that this so-called fight with Canada is to divert attention from what's going on in the Middle East. And I know that there are those who believe that everything, including what's happening in the Middle East, is an attempt to divert attention from Epstein. the Epstein files. So I don't know the answer to that question, but it's interesting that you think that it is a diversion, and I'm wondering what other people might think. Scott, followed by Amir.
All right. Waiting with bated breath here. Yeah, I don't know, Gary. Does anybody know? I mean, come on. Who knows?
Does anybody know what time it is? Does anybody even care about time? Sorry.
Exactly. I mean, look. Anything I say is going to be speculation, right? Anything any of us say is going to be speculation. But I mean, there's probably a combination of economic and political and in Trump's weird mind strategic reasons. I don't know. He loves tariffs, right? That's his preferred negotiating weapon. That's when he's on his playing field that he feels comfortable on. You know, it's not bilateral. It's him. He's got, at least before the, court decided that, there'd be, I don't know what the status forward is on tariff controls, but he likes tariffs, right? And his theory is, I guess, that because Canada depends so heavily on access to a much larger American market, that the threat of severe economic pain is going to force Canada to make all kind of concessions on things like dairy and, I don't know, automobiles or steel or booze or other stuff. I think when Trump sees imbalance, he pounces, right? He thinks that we have the stronger hand. There's probably a domestic political component to it, maybe. I don't know. Trump can present himself as being the guy that defends the American worker and manufacturer against this. Again, it's funny because he's sort of the tough guy and yet victimizer, a victimized person in chief, right? Like we're always the victim of these unfair foreign trade practices, right? So the American workers and manufacturers and the American people are being taken advantage of, and even though Canada's an ally, they're taking advantage, and he treats things transactionally. And I think also Trump likes to pick fights, right? So picking a fight creates a political narrative that he feels comfortable with. I don't know, the American industry versus foreign countries taking advantage of us, even though the actual economics of the whole thing and the relationships are much more complicated than that. I mean, look, some of this is just about dominance, right? Trump likes, Trump personally and politically likes dominance. He thinks that allies should just accommodate to American demands because we have this, from his perspective, I think, this dominant kind of role and power. So I think when a country like Canada just won't fall in line and challenges this, he gets pissed off. He gets frustrated. He doesn't know what to do. So I don't know. I mean, what I do know, I think what everyone here knows is that the American and Canadian economies aren't hermetically sealed, right? They're not separate machines. The automotive industry, the steel industry, agricultural industry, energy supply chain, all this stuff moves across the border a lot, right? And so this is a pretty complicated relationship. I mean, it's an interdependent relationship, and ultimately this kind of trade war hurts everybody, I think. But so yeah, I don't know, Gary, why. These are some speculative reasons. I have no idea. I mean, if Trump negotiated the USMCA anyway and called it like such a great deal, it's such a great deal.
That's a great point that I miss.
Why is Canada why is Canada suddenly
right?
Why now? Yeah, why is it so bad now? Why is Canada suddenly? And if Canada's cheating America, didn't he make the deal that allows them to cheat?
Exactly. I had this argument with somebody the other day.
So
what the hell? I don't know. Renegotiating it, and it makes no sense. No, like you're calling the deal you negotiated rigged. Like it was your thing.
And then again, this just gets back to the power and dominance thing, right? Maybe he just sees a window and sees opportunities. Like, all right, there's a point. There's a there's an availability to put pressure on, so I'll put pressure on. I don't know, Gary. This is, again, I say take everything with a pound of salt because it's all speculative.
Or it's, like you say, a diversion. I don't know. Or it could be like he just likes a fight, to have a fight. Who knows? I mean, it's so difficult to determine what the hell is going on here. Yeah, go ahead, Marshall. Marshall, followed by Amir.
Oh, I didn't realize my mic was open. I'm walking around in a neighborhood trying to find the right house. I don't understand why he's picking a fight with Canada. We had a perfectly good thing under NAFTA, and okay, fine, you want to renegotiate it, get the USMCA, but then you trash the thing you created in the first place because what, you want more punitive responses to America? Right? Some of this to me goes back to Trump being an imperial president. He wants our allies to treat us like vassal states of old wood. At least that's the impression I get. I get the impression he would much prefer a client state to vassal state relationship versus what we actually have, which is two allies working together for combined harmony. Right? And I have no idea why he views it the way he views it. As my little brother has said to me more than once, the person who came up with these sanctions, with these tariffs, was economically illiterate. Donald Trump at his heart is not a Republican. He's a 1980s New York style progressive business Democrat and thinks protectionism is the way to go. And so is far more willing to flirt with protection and imperialism than I think past presidents have been. Even though Bush waged 2 wars, Bush was not an imperial president. But Donald Trump certainly is an imperial president. And I think he views our relationships with people in a client-vassal relationship. I have no idea why, but that's the impression I get.
I'd like to hear some people, and I don't know whether this is something you feel comfortable talking about, addressing the issue that I raised about NORAD. It would seem to, and the comparison that I made to how he appears to be sucking up to a guy who has announced that he's our enemy and has announced that he aspires to fire missiles at the United States. And whether he would or he wouldn't is not the point. That's the relationship we have with North Korea. And we have a defense pact relationship where we rely on one another with Canada. And he's making nice with North Korea. And I'm not saying detente is a bad thing, but he's antagonistic toward Canada. I'm sorry, it's not logical, Captain Kirk, you know? And
nobody ever blamed Trump for being logical.
That's true. That's true. And as people say, we knew what we were buying. Some people may have buyer's remorse, but it's not as if he hid who he was. We had 4 years by which to assess him, not just his policies, but his character. And then we came back after he was defeated, and we then elected him again. You know, sometimes you elect people who are unknown quantities, and you're speculating based on how they present themselves, how good a job they're going to do. Not the case with Donald Trump. So, you know, you get what you buy. You get what you pay for, as they say.
Yeah, we get what we deserve in America and not what we need.
I've heard that also said. I know that when Ed Koch, mayor of New York, was defeated by Dinkins, he made the comment, you know, you get what you deserve in an election. That was his point of view as well. Thank you, Marshall. Kind of a little bit of sour grapes, but it may be true. Amir followed by Tiger.
Hey, Gary. I promise not to divert away from the topic.
I know it's tempting, isn't it?
Referring to me when you mentioned that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I sort of follow what you said. I think you made a point to Epstein files. I definitely think this whole thing, since January 26th that Epstein files were released, I think it was January 26th, and then after that, in February 26th, we had the first attack on Iran. And since then, there has been many sort of instances of Trump, his continuous storms in a teacup here and there, which I think for the majority of the time, we should not take any notice of it. I mean, I've said that before. It just allows him to divert attention from Epstein files and also from perhaps from even the personal gains that he had, which was reported by Wall Street Journal in I don't remember when it was, but it was to do with his was it WLF cryptocurrency, which apparently he made $6 billion or whatever. So that kind of conflict of interest and related party stuff, obviously, if you can move away from that by creating these little storms in a teacup, then you're doing quite well. And if you can ultimately blame the security aspect, I mean, if you can change the narrative, I mean, to give a security reason for the loss in midterm, that would be a phenomenal thing to do. I mean, that's brilliant. It sort of completely whitewashes everything else, and the Epstein files and the conflict of interest and all the rest of it. And it also is a good news for the Republican Party, I think, to some extent, because it kind of changes the narrative to the war in Iran, rather than we chose someone who's a questionable character. So yes, I mean, if they can sell this narrative on the midterm, I think that would be quite a coup. I mean, they're obviously going to lose anyway, but it's quite important to be able to change that narrative. I mean, that's all I really wanted to say. You prompted me, and you said that easy diverting attention. I definitely think it is, and there's been many, many occasions of it. I mean, obviously, there is a serious aspect to the war in Iran, and that's the nuclear stuff. That is one exception to everything else that I think is just that we shouldn't take any notice of. It's just diverting attention. Anyway, that's my view.
I hope that we entered into this war because we are really concerned about that, and it's not a diversion, because that would be criminal in my mind. Thank you, Amir.
The February follows the January. That's the only relation between the two. But yeah, anyway.
With regard to Epstein, as I've said often on this stage, and it's probably not the best way of expressing it, but I think it's a descriptive way of expressing it without quite crossing the line. I want to know the names of the men who dropped their pants. That's all I want to know. I want to know who they are. I don't care which political party, if they are politicians. We know all that nonsense happened. Nobody is questioning that these women were violated, many of them underage at the time. I don't think anybody's questioning that. What we are questioning is who are the men who participated in that. Obviously, they weren't all engaged in uninvited sexual relations with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There were guys over there on that island who participated in this debauchery, and there still hasn't been an accounting for that. There may never be a criminal accounting, I get that. But shouldn't there be an accounting in the public sphere? Who was there and what did they do? And you can't say that they don't know because they have the video evidence. So I don't want to look at the videos, but I want to know who's in them. And I'm not saying that all this is a diversion from Epstein, but I'm saying it's entered my mind that it might be. Thank you, Amir. We'll go to Tiger, followed by Alma.
All right, thank you, Gary. I want to say three things about Trump, and it's really not that complicated. The first thing is that we should never overanalyze Trump. From all of his policies in the past, Trump has demonstrated that he's the kind of guy that just throws everything at a problem and see what sticks, and then walk back the pieces that doesn't stick. He's done that in the tariff war. He's done that in the Doge cuts, and he's again doing it in Iran, and he's doing it now to Canada. So that's the first part. The second problem with Trump, not problem, just characteristics that I think we need to understand about Trump, is that he has a fundamentally different view of what alliance means to America than many of his predecessors. And, in some way he's correct, because I think America used to be the kind of power that enforces a order, and countries who are willing to play along with that order actually gets some kind of benefit from working with America. This is basically the framework set up after the Second World War. But what Trump has realized today is that order no longer works, especially not working for American interests in some ways. Because the elephant in the room is that the major adversaries are thriving, despite that they're unwilling to follow the rules dictated by Americans and not willing to participate fully. I mean, they do participate. Like China benefits enormously from the global order today. You could argue China benefits more than Americans do. And this is partially why, from Trump's understanding, this current global order needs to be, if not dismantled, changed to suit America's interests more. And from his rhetoric towards all the allies in NATO, in Europe, especially Northern Europe, and in Asia, right? He blames these countries for not participating in wars against Iran, for example. And to his mind, America is disproportionately paying for and contributing to the so-called mostly a military alliance in NATO and with security frameworks in the Pacific with Japan and Korea, but are not getting the results that when America tries to direct them to a geopolitical end, these countries refuse to follow America's suit. This is, to Trump, very unacceptable because he demands deference and he demands obedience from what Americans used to call allies, but people in China might call them vassal states. But yeah, it's these current relationship viewed by Trump is not balanced and is not working. The third thing that I think we have to realize about Trump's policy is that he's a very mercantilistic president. This is actually something in my past speakings about Trump, I used to praise him about, because I think, it correlates very well with what we call the comprehensive power of a nation, in particular, the industries of a nation. So to Trump's mind, to make America great again, and I agree with this assessment, that America needs to reindustrialize. And to reindustrialize, and to Marshall's point, Trump realizes a degree of protectionism is necessary to drive both capital and factories back into America. And without this, America will find it very hard to compete with its chief adversary in China. But he waged these kind of commercial, mercantilistic wars against all countries, whether they are allies or adversaries. But what he found out is that it's much easier to pick on these so-called allies who depend so much on America. If you look at the trade numbers, Canada, I believe, is 70% dependent on exports to America. Not to mention, like similar to Japan, the entire security framework that Canada has needs to be supported by America. So, and he tried the same thing with China, and Russia to some extent, and found that these countries are much harder to bully into shape. Because, first of all, China is a very different beast from all the other countries in that regard. But even countries like Russia, who has already been under American sanction and no longer have the kind of trade dependencies with the America-centered West in general, are very difficult to gain leverage over them. Rather, when America is trying to absorb all industrial productivity back into America, it's much easier to exact the kind of offerings and sacrifices from these NATO and Asian allies than to press on a very hard to deal with and combative adversary in China or Russia, and to some extent Iran as well. So I'm afraid this pattern will continue, and especially that we expect Trump is going to be a lame duck president. Probably this pattern will accelerate, because the executive power is going to be the major power that he will rely on after the midterm. Thank you.
I would agree 100% with your assessment. To your 70% figure, which is correct, about 70 or maybe 72%, depending on whose figures you're looking at, of Canadian exports are to the United States. But let's not lose sight of the fact that much of what the United States buys from Canada are essential raw materials, energy, specialized components that we do not produce here in the United States, or if we do, not in sufficient quantities. Or they could be minerals that we can't extract domestically, I guess. I haven't really looked into that, but I suspect that's probably part of the equation. So I understand that he views this as a competition, that the Canadian companies are competing with American businesses. But if you really look at it, and I acknowledge my view of it is a little bit biased based on my understanding of the automotive industry. But the Canadian goods are actually foundational building blocks, I guess, for manufacturing in the United States. The primary goods the United States buys from Canada include energy and crude oil and critical minerals. As somebody else previously mentioned, softwood lumber and forestry products, and as I mentioned many times, cross-border auto parts. It's how the ecosystem is right now. Now, if you want to change that, as you suggest, Tiger, you create manufacturing here in the United States. Of course, the problem that we have, and this isn't an issue with Canada, because Canada has the Canadian Auto Workers and we have the United Auto Workers, and there's a degree of parity in salaries. It's more with regard to China and other countries, Bangladesh, Vietnam, etc. It's gonna be hard to actually compete, even if you manufacture in the United States, because, well, we want a balance of trade that favors the United States, but we also believe fundamentally in people having the opportunity to earn a fair working wage. And a fair working wage in the United States is much higher than a fair working wage in Vietnam or Bangladesh or China, I guess. So, you know, there are a lot of factors here. But, you know, getting back to my understanding of the auto industry, Tiger, there was a time when people were proud to have American-built cars. And then we had the Japanese invasion of cars. And the Japanese cars outperformed in many respects the American-built cars. Well, instead of slapping high tariffs on Japanese cars to protect the jobs of the American auto workers, they retooled, and I'm not saying just retooling the factories, they retooled their entire approach to manufacturing. It took time to where the cars built in the United States were on a par with the cars built in Japan, or at least competitively so. And so, if you believe in the free enterprise system and you believe in competitiveness in that regard, then if you're concerned about the balance of trade with any country, then in as much as you have the opportunity to, now when it comes to resources, they are what they are, but you improve the way you are doing things in order to make it more attractive to the consumer to buy your goods, right? That's how it's supposed to work. In reality, though, the trade balance, yes, is off, but it's a symbiotic relationship that the United States has with Canada. And it's a symbiotic relationship economically that the United States has with China. It's not like we're not getting something out of it. And I think it's very myopic to only consider one aspect of this equation, Tiger, and not step back and look at the whole thing.
Of course, you're right, Gary. Because I said first, right, strategy and finesse is not Trump's strong suit. He might have a guiding direction, but his implementation often falls short, as in the tariff war and many other things. So I agree with you. But secondly, Gary, I think what you mentioned, there is a much bigger topic here, and I don't want to spend too much time to derail this room. But what you're essentially talking about, accepting free enterprise and competitiveness, that assumption itself is flawed. Because countries don't compete on equal footing, and especially with the modern monetary framework that's centered around the Fed, there's a thing called the Triffin dilemma. The United States has to export money, basically, in exchange for goods and services. And one of the direct results of that is the assets appreciation in the United States, because that kind of money are driven back in the United States mostly into assets, like financial assets. The elevation of the financial assets itself is also a suppressive factor on your factory production, because this is why wages in Asia and in Canada, for that matter, are much lower than what we call a livable wage in the United States. But that's a grander, much bigger topic. Maybe some other day we can read it.
Well, more so disparity in wages with China and other Asian nations than with Canada, because I think the dollar and the loonie are pretty close to being on a par. I don't know where they stand today. I haven't looked. But there's not much of a fluctuation between the two. So the economies are similar. Let's just put it this way. The standard of living is similar. I could look at figures in terms of the average wages in the United States versus Canada, and I might just do that before we're done here. But still, there's an interdependency is my argument. And it's up yet an exact quid pro quo, but it's not as if the United States doesn't gain from these relationships. And I understand the frustration, but this all started when the multinational corporations who we view as American corporations, but they're not. They're not beholden to the United States. They're beholden to their stockholders.
It's a pretty good point.
Made strategic decisions.
That's a pretty good point.
They made strategic decisions to offshore a portion of their operations in order to bring costs down. Because we have people here who worked on Wall Street, and they could explain a lot better than I can because I don't have an understanding particularly about it. But I do know that basically these companies have to show projected profits, and steady growth, being profitable is not necessarily enough to satisfy the stockholders. And so they offshore. Even something as relatively minor as the call centers for companies. They offshore them from the United States to India, and then they realized that it would be cheaper to offshore it from India to the Philippines. Now, all those people's jobs are in jeopardy because of AI. It's ever evolving. I get that, but I've reported in the past about how it's cheaper to take fish that's harvested in the United States and send it to China for processing and packaging, and then send it back to the United States, which is a great cost of transportation, and you're probably not getting fresh fish, you're getting frozen fish, but still, it's cheaper to do that than to do the processing here in the United States. Well, these companies are going to do what's best for them, not what's best for the United States. They're not going to say, well, we could save millions of dollars, and increase our profit margin, but we're an American company, so we're not going to do that. They don't think that way. So there you have it.
You touch on
it's a world economy, Tiger, right?
I saw you were finished. But a brief response. I think you touched upon a very critical point, because what you described, it's more of the internal dynamics of U.S. politics. In that, first of all, you're right. These countries are symbiosis, right? Because by distributing work in the way it is distributed today, the American companies benefit greatly in their profits numbers. But the problem in America's domestic politics is that not all Americans benefit equally from these dealings. Most of that profits are being ripped away by the capitalists in this country, whereas most workers are not getting their fair share of the benefit. They do get something in their lowered, prices when it comes to purchasing the end products, but they're losing the sources of income that used to support them in this country. So this imbalance is actually the populist force that drove Trump into office. The second point that's related to this, but not exactly the same, is that even among the capitalists, there are divergent interests. If your company is a assets-light type of company, which means you don't do too much manufacturing, or your core competitiveness doesn't come from the manufacturing itself, companies like Apple, right? Their competitiveness is the design and the software. Then for them, it's much easier to ship the jobs that actually has to do with industrial output to China and India, to some extent, Vietnam. But if you are the traditional type of enterprises that are assets heavy and are labor heavy, then first of all, your interest is different than the other type of capitalists, like the big tech. And secondly, you are affected disproportionately by these tariffs and other measures. So the divergence in the capitalism itself is also In some theories, Trump is said to be representing more of the interest of the more traditional asset-heavy type of capitalists, because first of all, it's connected in real estate, and second for, I think it fits his agenda because he also relies on the populism in the United States to get elected. But I don't want to take too much time, so I'll give the mic back to you.
Yeah, I think that if the president were a great communicator, he might find this an easier road to travel, his intents. Because if he were to explain to the American people in terminology that, look, we need to do this because we need to create and protect American jobs, and he laid out a plan, you might not agree with his strategy, but at least you would know where he's going. And we wouldn't be having a conversation based on the question, why is Trump picking a fight with Canada? We would be saying, is the fight with Canada strategically proper way of getting to that goal? Well, I wouldn't word it that way because there's not enough room in the title to do it. But basically, that's what we would be discussing. But he hasn't communicated what you just suggested to anybody. And so we have to be Trump readers, read his mind, try to understand what he's saying. We have to be dog whisperers and horse whisperers, Trump whisperers. People come sometimes to the microphone and explain to us what Trump really means when he says things, because he doesn't really say what he means in a manner which people can comprehend. It's sort of like going to an evangelical revival and somebody stands up and starts talking in tongues, and then somebody else stands up and interprets what that person is saying. We need people to interpret what the president is saying, and he might have good reasons for taking this kind of action against Canada, but instead of explaining to the American people his reasoning, he says that they're horrible people, the Canadians, horrible people. And I might just change the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. I mean, what the hell is that? Thank you, Tiger. We'll go to Alma. I think I need new glasses. I'm having trouble reading the names sometimes. Alma followed by Mons. Alma, you with us? Monsef followed by David.
Hey, thanks, Gary. A lot of good points from Tiger today. I appreciate his spot on. A lot of times he's spot on things. Picking a fight with Canada at this time when we're basically in a fight with the whole world, whether it's Europe with their NATO contributions, whether it's the Middle East with the war in the Middle East, whether it's the on and off trade war with China that Trump started and then he backed off, and then he started and then he backed off, and he's still threatening to do it. Canada is the last country you want to have a trade war with. We do rely on a lot of things.
Your microphone's open. We don't hear you, Monsef. Now that is weird. I can see that his microphone is open, but we can't hear him.
Can you
Still
hear me
now? Now we do. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Did you hear anything I said?
You're underwater.
Hello?
Try it again.
Oh, shit.
You said the last thing you said is the last country we want to pick a fight with is Canada.
Yeah,
that's the last
because, like I said, a trade war with Canada would hurt U.S. consumers to an extent that that Trump doesn't come clean and say, "Hey, we're going to put these tariffs with Canada. We are going to get hurt." The message you get from Trump is that he still does it now when he does his rallies, is that the United States is getting rich, crazy rich from these tariffs, which is not something that anyone could prove because we're not getting rich. The country the treasury is not bringing in massive amounts of money from tariffs. The courts have decided that actually the United States has to reimburse a lot of companies for tariff expenses. So I don't know what he's referring to when he says that the United States is getting richer than before because of his tariff policy. He still says that tariffs is his favorite word in the dictionary. He just said it like 3 days ago in a rally somewhere. Just one example, Gary, like Canada is the leading exporter in the world of potash. It's something that every farmer needs. It's to grow their crops. The United States is I think we're account for 70-80%, probably 90% of our potash consumption from Canada because of the proximity and because it's needed. Putting higher tariffs on potash, it directly links to the food chain in the United States. Farmers were going to have to endure, higher costs for things like this to make them grow their plants and crops, passing the cost along to U.S. consumers who will find anything from vegetables to meat to whatever more expensive at the store. And that's only happened because, Canada is going to do, whenever you announce that you're going to, put tariffs on any country, they are going to retaliate and they're going to put retaliatory tariffs on you. Guess who the other two countries, if the U.S. finds now that Canadian potash is more expensive? Guess who the other two countries are the leading potash producers in the world? Russia and China. So if we don't get our potash from Canada because it's more expensive, are we going to go to Russia and buy our potash from it and make Russia rich? Are we going to bring our potash from the other side of the world, from China, because we have to? We just don't have enough potash. This blows the whole theory of the comparative advantage that people learn in like the first week of economics school, that you do what you're best at and then it becomes easier aid with your partners because then you're that you're not good at. It also goes with in a time when you actually need what the other countries have for your own survival and your own production, your own chain, your food chain and your own whatever. You don't start a trade war because they can hit you when it hurts. And in this case, Canada can hurt us when it, like I said, you mentioned earlier, oil. We still import, I don't know how many millions of barrels a day from Canada.
You're under the water again there, buddy.
Okay.
We've lost you. We've lost you. So I'm sorry, Monsef, we lost you. I don't know why your signal is strong and then gets like that. For those who don't know, potash is referring to minerals containing potassium. It's fertilizer to which he refers when he says potash. And, the United States cannot produce enough of it domestically, so we rely on Canada to fill the gap. So if we lose the fertilizer because of a trade war with Canada, I think is Monsef's argument, what does that do to our agriculture industry? I think as we try to analyze the reasons behind the president's strategies, we have to always remember the art of the deal. And I know he didn't write the book, but the book was about him. And I think we have seen, those of us who know him from his real estate dealings here in New York, and now the rest of us knowing him for his dealings as president of the United States. He's a guy who likes to create leverage by creating, I think, a crisis. And he believes that that maybe forces the other side to the negotiating table, not just forcing them to the other side to the negotiating table, but from a position of weakness. And he made it very clear during the campaigns that he believes in disruption. And maybe we didn't all wrap our minds around what that meant. Maybe when he was talking about that, when he's talking about draining the swamp, for example, we know that there is redundancy in services in Washington, and there are places where there can be cuts, and that led to the Doge experiment, which I don't know whether the report card on that is very encouraging or not. But when it comes to diplomacy, the diplomacy that people like Marshall and I feel comfortable with, and probably a lot of you, is, it's not something that occurs overnight. There's a slow evolution to reach a consensus. And this president intentionally uses unpredictability, I guess, maybe, and conflict for sure, to disrupt the status quo. I think he probably believes it gives the United States the upper hand. And maybe one can understand that with regard to relationships with adversaries, although there could be arguments against that. But why allies? And the other thing that we have to, I think, recognize, and his prowess with this group of people is really evident when we look at the win-loss column of people he's endorsed in the midterms. He's lost some, but he's won a lot more than he's lost. I think he's in the 90 percentile of success the last time I checked. He's trying to fulfill his campaign promises to his base. I think his base is very comfortable. Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more than that, though. I think it's not just. I think it's not just fulfilling promises to the base. I think it's expanding his power base in the party, so that to prove that he can primary you, to prove that even a weaker candidate, and probably Texas would not be moved from likely Republican to tossed up by Cook if he had picked Cornyn. But when he does this, right, he shows that he's got the power. But even if he loses the midterm, he still ruined his political career. And I think that's going to come in handy if and when, and likely when, the Democrats win the midterms and there's investigations. Because then I think he's trying to get Republicans to think twice. Oh my gosh, maybe now is when I, launch my profile in courage and actually join in with and do some oversight. So I think there's some motivated reasoning beyond just the promise to the base. I think that there's some self-protection going on. And that's why I think he's kind of being not moving to the center, not doing some things you would think he would do if he cared about a different midterm result.
Well, fundamentally, and this is a little bit off the topic, but since you raised the issue, I think that fundamentally when a politician in general, there are probably exceptions, there are probably a lot of exceptions, but in general, politician triages what's most important. The first thing is what's most important to him or her. And that has to do with re-election or upward mobility in the political structure or post-office opportunities in the private sector. That is the priority. And I think for many of them, second on the triage list is the party. What's best for the party? I point to Chuck Schumer as a prime example of that. and his commentary about how important it is to elect al-Sayed as the U.S. Senator from Michigan, even though many Jews who he pledged to be their protector find his candidacy disquieting, because he has said the priority is the Senate, regaining control of the Senate. The priority is not protecting the Jews, if in fact he would agree with a lot of Jews who feel ill at ease with al-Sayed. Not all Jews do, but a lot do. And then the third in the list of in this triage list, Scott, in my opinion, is what's best for their constituents and the nation. And I think that they've got the list inverted. And I think it takes a lot of character, and you put yourself on the line as McCain's daughter did, and as Fetterman is doing on the other side of the aisle today. He might get primaried out because he's trying to build bridges with the Republicans, and this is unacceptable with many in his power base. And the genesis of all that is exactly what you just described with the President of the United States right now. You're either with me or you're against me, and if you're against me, you're toast. And so even if there are Republicans who find, as I do, this attitude toward the Canadians to be repulsive, mum's the word. God forbid they stand up and talk about what they really believe. Mum's the word. Do you think I'm on target here with that comment, Scott?
Yeah, I think you're generally on target. Like, more reliably than not. Yes, I think you're making some sense here. Not just because we're.
We never bought with that shit.
All right, that's really nice. Thanks for coming onto the stage and disrupting, but you're not on the stage any longer
Today. Yeah. Lately, what's great about the room's success? This is the measure of the room's success. The more trolls, the better you're doing, Gary. I really believe that in Clubhouse.
So are you saying that the attacks that I'm receiving on social media right now for simply posting something the president said shows I'm doing the right thing?
Gary, no press is bad press. You know that, Gary. You're a newsman. You know that.
Well, I'll tell you, the last discussion about that has received on my Facebook probably double the normal of number of people reading it. But I'm not in it for the numbers, but it that kind of speaks to the point that you just made. Thank you for that, Scott. I needed to have my head shrunk because of the unrelenting assault on me, and I'm so thin-skinned. I hope none of them are listening as I break down and cry over it. Okay, I'm over that now. Dave William.
Hello, Gary.
Hello, David.
What's happening? Yeah, look, this is probably the worst trade deal in American history. It's already being lampooned all over the press. Carney's been a rock and a hard place because, he's asking Carney to also diminish the French language over there, a pro-English
agenda.
I
missed that.
Yeah, you did.
Well, he asked. Wait a minute. He asked Carney to do away with French as an official language of Canada.
Yeah, he wanted to sideline the politics behind that with regard to the legacy of the French Quebecians that were around right from the very beginning.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Who the hell is he to tell Carney? The hell is he to tell Carney this? This has nothing to do with the United States.
Right. But what I'm saying is it speaks to his immigration policies here, attacking, Latinos and Spanish language. I mean, it's a salvo that he's launched at Carney. And again, I mean,
well, there's some advantages to that, because the next time I watch a hockey game that's emanating from Canada, when they sing the national anthem, I'll know all the words.
Well, there you go.
Because when they sing "Oh Canada," they sing verses in both English and in French, and I don't know what they're saying when they're singing it in French. And so I'm all for it. Come on, Connie, get rid of that. Get rid of the francophones. Let's do it.
Yeah.
For Gary. Because I want to enjoy the game, and right from the beginning, it's such a wonder. Their national anthem is a wonderful national anthem. I love their national anthem, but I'd like to be able to understand what they're singing. Come on.
Well, anyway, yeah. So, in the history, obviously, I mean, Trump would like to co-opt Canada as the 51st state. And, like I said in the room the other day, I mean, look, America's never wanted for expanding itself, irrespective of what the other cultures want. But look, Canada has ways to retaliate. The that they provide us, they could black out all the Northeast, even going all the way down to New York, by cutting off the energy supplies. Monsef brought up the potash, the fertilizer play. That would really harm our farmers here. But Trump's also out there trying to weaponize an America First voting bloc, right? And what's real interesting about that is he's dispatched Vance to Maine to help backstop Susan Collins. And Susan Collins is contradicting Trump by saying this trade war is horrible for Maine residents and also for Canada because of how proximity. And Vance is coming in saying, "Hey, we got to be strong on Canada here." So I think there's going to be a lot of blowback, voting blowback with regard to this agenda. Canada buys more cars than I think the combined car buying numbers of 3 or 4 of our top trading partners, Japan, China, a few others. So, and not just that, they're also voting with their real estate pocketbooks. They're not buying and they're not rent. They're not coming to our properties here. They're putting their homes on the market in places like Florida.
Right. The winter, what do they call them? The
snowbirds
from Canada.
Snowbirds.
The snowbirds. Yeah. I've read a lot about snowbirds who are not snowbirding any longer.
Yeah, and these are relationships. These are friendships that